So this is a follow-up to my previous video on how to animate your Hero Forge or other source content and bring it into Talespire. So I'm sure some of you have tried the Mixamo Auto Rigger, and some of you probably got good results, and some of you got horrible results. Yes, that's the downside of an auto rigger, is that if the shape is not exactly what it's expecting, it's not going to look good. In some other cases, the character is good, but if you have, for example, an axe or a sword, it turns into a big wand of licorice and bends in all kinds of directions as the character moves. So obviously in those cases, the auto rigger is not a real viable solution, and therefore you need to rig the mini yourself. And that's what we're going to do in this tutorial. I'm going to give you kind of the quick tutorial on doing some rigging and the basics of rigging your character manually. And then if that's something that interests you, I'm sure you can find many other videos that go into more detail. So let's start. So I've opened up my Blender here and have brought in an asset that I want to try to rig. Now this asset is in a typical A pose, but with the manual rigging, it's a lot more flexible than an auto rigger. So your character can pretty well be in any pose. You still need to have mesh separation. So for example, if this arm was right by the body and there was no gap in between, you would have a difficult time rigging it. You'd have to take some extra steps to separate the two meshes out. But as long as you've got some separation, it really doesn't matter in which pose the character is, because we can create the skeletal structure to accommodate that. I'm going to be starting here and just doing a very simple skeletal structure. That basically means that if I wanted to animate it, which I will show how to do, it all has to be done using first principle animation. If you wanted to actually reuse some animations from like the Mixamo page, you would have to create a skeletal structure that has similar bones to the Mixamo skeletal structure so that it could then match up the bones. But we're not going to worry about that here. We're going to just animate the character using Blender first principles, and that's what I'm going to show you here. So with your asset loaded, we are going to go in the object mode and add a armature. An armature is basically just a fancy name for a skeletal structure. Now it looks like my asset is very, very big because that beginning bone is very, very small. That's okay. We can resize that, and then once we're done, we can scale the whole mini if it's too big. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to switch to edit mode. I'm going to pick off the end of that bone, and then I'm going to start moving it and make it big. Okay, so now again, normally if you were creating this and wanted to be able to reuse animations from Mixamo or other sources, you would make a skeletal structure that is very similar to that. I'm going to make a very basic one here just to kind of show what the process is all about. So I'm going to move this up in her torso. I'm going to select the see-through affect both ends. That's going to make this kind of X-ray so I can see it a little bit better. We'll probably give her body a couple of bones to it so that she can kind of bend over. So again, selecting that, I'm going to move the bone, make it a little bit smaller. And when you've got the end of a bone selected, you can hit E to extrude to basically start another bone. So I'm going to, let's say, just go with 2 bones for the body. And then I'm going to make some bones here for the shoulders. The upper arm, lower arm, and I'm not really going to worry about the hand here. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. If you're familiar with Blender, you can turn on mirror mode so that as you're working on one side, it will automatically work on the other side. I have chosen not to do that here. And then we'll go here, extrude one for the head. We probably want to do a smaller one first and then a second one so that she would be able to kind of bend her head at the neck area. And now we're going to do a similar thing for the legs. I'm just going to move this up a little bit. I'm not going to really create any kind of hip bones here. I could go to the side like with the shoulders, but I'm just going to cheat and go straight for the legs. And again, I'm not going to worry about the feet. So now when you're creating your skeletal structure, what you want to do is basically make sure that the joints of the bones end up in places where the body parts move. So you can see at the legs, I've broken the two bones at the knees, here at the elbows. In the body, I've broken it somewhere in the hip where one might bend over. Same thing with the neck. So here we basically got a very quick skeletal structure here. So now, if we look into our editor here, our asset list, we can see that we now have a armature. No, we have two. All right, so there's our armature, and this is the mesh of the character that we've just created, Mini. Okay, so now that we've got our armature, what we want to do is we want to name our bones so that they're much more intuitive as to which bone is which. By default, the armature is created with bones that are numerically numbered, but that doesn't help us much. So what we're going to do is we're going to select our mesh here. We're going to hide it so it's not visible. Then we're going to select our armature and go to edit mode. And now we're going to click on each one of those bones. Okay, so this, for example, is the upper leg right. Below that is lower leg right. Character's right, not my right. Okay, here. This is lower body. Upper body. This is shoulder right. Shoulder left. Neck. Head. Upper arm right. Upper arm left. Upper, shoulder, upper arm right, No, this is lower arm right, upper arm left, lower arm left. Missed. Don't know why this one's not showing up at all. Upper leg left. Lower leg left. No, this is lower leg left. So that's going to be upper leg left. Don't know what those bones are. Well, I'm not going to worry about that right now. I must have added some extra bones somewhere here. Alright, so good. Now we have our armature all nicely named. And when we turn back on our mesh, we can see that our mesh and our armature are completely separate at the moment. They are not linked in any manner whatsoever. And we want to fix that because we want our armature, our bone structure, to actually move our mesh. So this is a two-step process. First of all, we're going to select our mesh, Control-Shift our armature, and then while we're in the layout pane in object mode, we're going to Control-P. Now that gives us parenting options. The option we want to try is the automatic weights. What automatic weights does is it asks Blender to try to figure out which bones move which part of your mesh. So, for example, when you move your arm bone, you want it to move only the arm portion of the mesh. Blender will try to figure that out, and if it can, it will assign the weights, which we'll discuss in a moment. Most of the time, though, either Blender will assign some weights, but they'll need to be fixed, or Blender may tell you that it's not able to assign them automatically at all, and you will have to go through and do it manually. So I'm going to try it with automatic weights. And it looks like we did not get an error at the bottom of the screen, so that means that it managed to assign some weights. Now we're going to go through and have a look to see if they're appropriate or not. So we do that by going and selecting our mesh, which is now under the armature, switching the mode to weight paint mode, and then down here going to our bones. So we can see our bones here, and you can see that as I cycle through them, we're getting various colors showing up on the on our asset. That's what's called weight painting. What weight painting does, it says, if I move a particular bone, what parts of the mesh should move along with it? Blender uses a scale from blue to red, so it goes from dark blue to light blue to green to yellow to orange to red. If you have a dark blue color, such as that blue here, that means that whatever bone you have selected has zero influence on that part of the mesh. So when I move the lower leg left bone, it will not have any effect on any of this except for what's here in green. The opposite end of that spectrum, full red, means that when a bone is moved, that part of the mesh will fully move with it. All of the colors in between dictate some amount of influence. So for example here, Blender has assigned this green. Green is pretty low. So that means when I start moving that bone, this leg is going to move, but it's going to move only somewhat. We don't want that. We know that if I move that lower leg bone, it should move that lower leg. So I think we're going to need a higher influence here. Probably I would go with red or close to red. Okay. As I cycle through the bones, I can see now the upper leg. So yes, Blender has said, okay, well, the upper leg is this portion here. So it's influencing that. But again, the influence is fairly low. I mean, we could try that, but I've got a feeling that we're going to have to up that influence. We've got a couple of unknown. Looks like I duplicated the left leg for some reason. So here we've got the right leg, and for some reason, that right leg, it did a much better job. So here we can see it's saying when we move that lower right leg, it's going to influence 100% the lower portion of the leg, and then it's going to fall off on the upper portion, which makes sense. If you're going to move your lower leg, it's going to have a little bit of influence on the upper leg, but not much. And we can see that it's falling off relatively quickly. So that was a very good assignment. We probably want to kind of mimic that on the other side. What else do we have? So upper leg, same thing. Here it did a much better job. It's got a higher influence there. Then we got the head. Head is looking pretty good, but the second antennae or whatever that is on the fairy should also be red because we don't want it kind of being left behind. Then we've got neck here. Neck is isolated pretty good, but probably the influence could be stronger. Otherwise, when we bend that neck, we're going to have to significantly move the bone to get some reaction out of it. Left arm, that looks pretty good to me. The upper arm, okay, so Blender has kind of decided that the wing goes with the upper arm. Okay, that could be. If this arm is moved forward, the wing is probably not going to move forward with it, so that's probably a pretty good estimate. Shoulder, we're probably not even going to really use the shoulder bones. They're there more just to get the arm in the right position, so that's okay. Okay, so lower right arm looks good. They've on this side, Blender decided that the wing is very slightly affected by this arm. We could probably get rid of that. We probably don't want the lower arm to affect the wing at all. Then we've got the upper arm. So Blender has decided that the upper arm has some influence. So this should probably be increased. And this wing should probably have more influence. But Blender also decided that some of the back wings should be affected. I think we probably could get rid of that. I think the right-hand side was more accurate. Shoulder, similar situation where we're really not going to use the shoulder, so the weight mapping doesn't really matter. Upper body, yeah, that looks about right. It's got the strongest influence in the front. Probably the yellow part could be raised a little bit so that the back is going to move more with that bone. Then we have the lower body. Lower body, again, this portion of it I think could be influenced more. And I'm not sure that the skirt really goes with the lower body. Well, I guess if you're going to bend over, you don't want, yeah, could be. And looks like I had some bones there from a previous attempt that I got rid of. So anyways, we've gone through our bones here. We've gone through what the weight mapping here was assigned by Blender, but we've identified a bunch of places that we need to fix that up. So how do we fix that up? Well, when you're in weight paint mode, here it shows you what weight you're applying. The weight here, 1 is maximum, so basically red, or going towards red, and 0 is no influence, so it's going to make things go back to blue. Now, it's kind of an additive process that when you start to paint, it's not going to go immediately red. It's going to start going towards red, and as you paint over it multiple times, you're going to get that maximum. You got here radius of your paint, and the strength is how strong it's going to be changing things. So the smaller value in strength, the more times you're going to have to paint over it to get to that final color. Okay, so now if we start painting this like this, as you can see, what's immediately happening is I'm hitting other parts of the mesh that I don't want to be hitting. Now I can go and paint that back, but that's very, very dangerous, because what happens is if there is any part of that mesh, some tiny little part that is not 0 influence, when we animate our character and move that lower leg, we're going to see that other parts of the body are moving. In this particular case, this wing or whatever it is, moving a little bit probably wouldn't be that bad, but probably it wouldn't look good because that influence would probably be in a very small point. So what you're going to have to see is these kind of like spikes now suddenly coming out of the body. So we don't want that. And it would be even worse if it was on some other body part. So we need to find a way that we can draw on only a portion of the mesh without affecting the other mesh, or the rest of the mesh. And we can do that. We do that by switching into edit mode. Now here's our mesh. Now we can use any of the selection tools. I'm going to use the circle tool here, but you could use any of the other ones. And I'm going to select my leg that I'm trying to affect. Now here I've also influenced other parts of the mesh, but in edit mode it's really obvious for me to see that, so I can very easily clean that up. I can get rid of those, and now I am sure that I've only got that leg. I can switch back to weight paint mode, and now I select this little icon here right beside the mode. That now locks my painting to only the selected portion of the mesh. So now I can, I can start painting here, and what you'll see is I can only paint in the area that I've selected, and then what it automatically does is it does a little bit of a blend beyond the edges so that I don't get a sharp edge. But what this prevents is me being able to go and draw on any of these other parts and leaving behind any kind of a weight paint. So this way I know that I've only affected this leg, and our leg is now corrected. So I can go on to the lower leg. Okay, same situation. So I'm going to toggle back to edit mode, deselect everything. I'll probably use my circular tool again and grab the knee and up to somewhere here. Now I kind of need to decide whether or not I think that skirt should move with the upper leg. I think it should, so I'm going to include part of that skirt in here. Now that wing, I think that wing would not be affected. So I am going to circle tool and get rid of that wing. So it should be only the skirt. Oops. It's a skirt. Looks like it. So with that selected, I'm going to toggle back into weight paint mode. Again, now it's locked to that. So if I'm drawing here, I'm only affecting the the upper leg and the skirt. You will notice that when you're weight painting, the weight painting is kind of triggered by the edges of the polygons. So when I'm drawing here, you can see it's not really drawing until I start to hit those edges. It's hard to show here. No, yeah. So I had to go up here, hit the edge, and then it turned red. So, okay, that's that one done. The two unknowns we're just going to ignore here. Okay, then we have our lower leg here. We said that was actually pretty good. Upper leg was pretty good. Head, pretty good except for that antenna. So here, I really don't need to use this blocking because I can access this without hitting anything else. So I'm just going to try to make my but I could have done the same thing. I could have put went into edit mode and made a mask for it to make sure that I can I don't hit anything else. But I think it's good. So that is the head. Neck, I was suggesting that we should probably have more influence with the neck. So again, edit mode, I'm going to deselect that. I'm going to box select this. Probably unselect part of that. Something like that. Toggle back to weight paint mode. Now, whoops, turn the locking on. Okay. Neck. This looks like is the lower right arm. Looks pretty good. Upper arm. So we were saying that the upper arm goes with the wing. Did we do that same thing on the other side? We haven't gotten there yet, have we? Shoulders we don't care about. So lower arm. So I'm going to get rid of the influence here on the wing to kind of match the other side. So edit mode, deselect. Now I'm going to have to try to select this wing. Try doing this. Did I also select my hand, or now that I took it off of dual side? Oh. Okay, that looks okay. Whoa. Yeah. Looks like. All right. So back to weight paint, lock it, and then I'm going to go this time to 0 because I want to try to get rid of the influence. Okay, that looks like I've gotten rid of the influence. So now that lower arm is not going to influence this wing at all. And on the upper, so we were saying that these back wings shouldn't be affected at all. So I can do that. Hit those edges. All right. So I've gotten rid of the influence there. Probably, okay, well, we definitely want to get rid of the influence on the antenna. And we want to get rid of the influence on the wing. Come on. All right, and now we want to, we need to get that arm selected so that we can draw only on the arm. So, unselect that. Try. Oh, it's supposed to be only the upper arm. That's right. Mm. All right. Whoops. Got a little bit of... Okay, so if we go back to weight paint mode, lock, influence, okay. Folder, we said shouldn't really influence anything. direction. Okay. Upper body. Yeah, we said probably should have a little bit more influence because on the back we aren't getting anything there. So again, edit mode. Deselect everything. Go both ways. Box. Upper body. Something like that. Get rid of the wing influence here. Yep, that's good. Go to the weight. Up a notch. Whoops. Keep forgetting to turn that on. Now, as it is, the fall off is being added by the edges, so I think I don't really need to create that on my own. You can see that there's kind of a gradient going towards the green and blue, so that the edges aren't sharp. Lower body. So this was the one that we weren't quite sure about the the skirt portion of it, but sure. So I'm going to double check, grab that. Now for some of the weight mapping and stuff, you're just going to have to weight map it and then give it a try to see how it works. And if not, then go back and modify it a little bit. So in this particular case, I'm going to leave this skirt in there. I don't know how that's going to look, but we'll see when we try to animate it. And if it turns out bad, then we can always go in and modify. Okay. Is that it? Okay, so now if we just kind of cycle through it, I think, oh wait, there we got influence on the wing. That's our upper arm. I didn't do that on the other one, did I? Yeah, so this arm is supposed to have influence on the wing. Somehow I missed that. Okay. So I am going to go and go to edit mode. Turn off both directions so I can select this wing. Oh, didn't select the... Okay. Weight paint. Okay. So cycling through that. That looks pretty decent. Okay, so now we have it, our asset weight mapped, hopefully, properly. And now we can go into animation, pose mode and animation mode to basically animate our asset, make some animations, which we can then take into Talespire. Okay, so with our asset weight painted, we are ready to check the if the animations work correctly and or poses work correctly, and then we can do some animation. So we go back to object mode. Now we go to Armature, and we should be able to switch to pose mode. So in pose mode, we can see our skeletal structure, but it should be moving our meshes along with our bones when we move the bones. So first, before we're actually going to try to do some animations, we're going to test the weight paint. So I'm going to select a bone here, and then I'm going to rotate it. Okay, so we can see, looks pretty good. Looks like that the leg is moving, and we're getting a little bit of the upper leg, but nothing else is being shifted, so that's good. Control Z that. Let's do that one. Okay, so here, for example, we can see that part of the back wing there seems to have been attached with this, and so this needs to be fixed up. We need to go back into the weight paint and make sure that the two wings don't have any influence. So they've got to be pure black. Pure blue. So that was not good, but similar situation here. We're getting influence, so that skirt might be okay, but we're definitely getting some influence down on this area here. That back one probably should also be removed from there. This one. So this one seems to be working pretty good. There's nothing else that's really moving with that one, so that one's good. Probably, I mean, that's one we probably aren't going to use. I think if we were going to bend at the waist, we'd probably use this one. And that one seems to be pretty good. I can do a rotate X. Yeah, so that one's working pretty good. Looks like half the wings are affected by it and half them aren't, so theoretically that should be fixed. That seems to be working well. Yeah, that seems to be working well. Lower arm. Yep. Upper arm. Yep. Lower arm. Oh, there's a little bit on the wing there. And those back wings should not be affected. Undo everything here. So yeah, well, we obviously have some issues here that would need to be fixed up. In this particular case, it got a little complicated because of all these wings in the back. But yes, this is the kind of situations that you would now go back and fix up your weight painting. In the pose, you basically see what it's affecting and find all the parts of the mesh that shouldn't be affected, and go back in the weight paint and make sure that they are pure dark blue, meaning no influence from those bones. I'm not going to go back and fix it right now. I'm just going to show you guys how to animate your figures once you have a nice clean armature with a good mesh pairing. So let's go on with that. So in order to do that, we're going to want to switch to the dope sheet instead of timesheet. So I'm going to go to dope sheet. I'm going to open this up a little bit. And now, if you have this selected, this dope sheet will show you only the bone that you are currently got selected. Open that up. And if you do not have this selected, it will show you all of your bones. Now, we're not seeing anything here because we so far have not actually written anything to our timeline. So what we're going to do is, let's say we're going to start in this pose. Okay, we can change this as much as we want, but for this animation, let's say we're going to start in this pose. So in order to write these bones to the timeline for it to remember it, you can either have all of the bones recorded, or if you're working on certain parts of the body and you want to just isolate those, you can just select those bones. So for my starting point here, I'm going to go to pose. I'm going to go animations, insert keyframe, and now for the beginning, I'm going to select whole character. So now it's taken every bone that I've got, and it's marked it here with a dot. That means at these positions, it's going to remember the position, rotation, and scale of all these bones. So now we can move further down in the timeline. Let's go to 30 seconds. And now we can make a different pose. So for example, we can grab this bone, rotate Y, flat, rotate Y, flat, and maybe we're going to kick this I think that was that unknown bone that I've got there, because it didn't seem to move the foot back. So rotate X. There we go. And we'll do the same thing to this foot, for example, or leg. Rotate X back like that. So now we've made a different pose, and we can do the same thing. We can either save the whole bodies, which will save all the bones, or we can select here all the bones that we're interested in, and in that case we would do, so we can actually do that. We did what? We did the upper arms. So we did lower legs, lower leg, and then upper body, and the two upper arms. So I can select upper arm, lower leg, and now I can go to pose, animation, insert keyframes, and instead of whole character, I can go whole character, selected bones only. And now you can see it's just saved key points on the bones that I've actually selected here. That can be very important, because if you, for example, have, let's say you're doing a animation of the head, so maybe having her look around, and then you're doing animations of the feet, the two may not be related. So every time you write down a bone change for the feet, you may not want to have a corresponding key for the head. So that's why you can kind of separate it out to do whatever bones you need, and it'll write those. And we continue to do that process. So I can go now to whatever, 90, and RY, 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 RY. What did I just do? Y. There we go. Okay, some crazy thing like that. I don't remember all the bones I changed here, so I'll just do, in this case, another whole character, whatever. Now looking at this, what this is showing you is every time you have a dot, that means that that particular bone changed in either of position, rotation, or scale. If you have a line like this, it means that you've keyed the bone at both those positions, but it hasn't changed in between. So this is telling me that all of these things that are lines here haven't changed between 0 and 90. All of the stuff where there's a gap and you see dots, the dots tell you where a bone was changed, and it's telling you that it didn't stay the same. Now, we have identified, let's say, what the bones are at 0, at 30, and 90, but Blender will extrapolate all of the frames in between. So you can see if I scrub through the timeline right now, you can actually see that animation. And obviously we can keep doing this further and further out. Keep in mind that on the timeline, you have indicated how many frames your animation is going to be. So that's the maximum number of frames. So if your animation needs more than that frames, you can definitely, on the dope sheet, you can go beyond this limit, but don't forget before saving it or exporting it out to correct this value. Otherwise, not all of your animation is going to get exported out. On the timeline, we can also go back and actually play this and see our animation happening. Now, if you're doing an animation for a game like Talespire, you need to distinguish between animations that are going to be continuous and animations that are going to be like once or capped. So typically what you're going to want to do is if you have multiple animations, you're going to put them all in the same same timeline or on the dope sheet, one after each other. I suggest using like starting each one at a nice frame number that's easy to remember. So, you know, if our animation goes to 90 here and I want to start a new one, I might start at 100. If our animation went to 140, I might start the next one at 200. So it's easy to find in Talespire. So now, if you're making a looping animation, so for example, like an idle animation that is going to play continuously unless you choose a different animation to play, what you're going to want to do is make sure that your first frame and your last frame are the same. So if we go back to our dope sheet here, and we're working on an animation here, let's say I'm going to go to something like 160, and I want to make it a looping animation. What I would do is I would select all my bones. I would go to my first frame here. And select the bones that I'm interested in looping. I'm going with all of them here, but you don't necessarily have to have all of them. You could set up differently. I'm going to do a copy, go to my destination frame, and do paste. Looks like it copied only the one. I haven't quite figured that one out, why sometimes it will copy multiple and sometimes it will copy one, but we can repeat the process for each bone here. I'm missing that one here. And basically by doing this, I'm making sure that whatever I started my animation with, that's what I'm going to end up with. And that means that when Talespire loops it, you're going to have a smooth loop. If your first frame, if your bones for the first frame and your last frame are different, then you're going to have a jarring animation. It's going to get up to the last frame, and then within one frame, it's going to switch to the first one. And if those two don't match, your animation is going to suddenly jump. If you're doing a one loop animation, like a run through once animation, or one that runs through once and then stays on the last frame, you don't need to worry about that because you're only playing it once, so there isn't a loop back to the first frame that would be jarring. You're obviously going to have a jarring loop when you restart your idle animation, but that's to be expected. With something like Talespire, there's no real way to get around that without introducing some kind of an animation in between that you could play to kind of go from the one to the other, but that kind of makes it a lot more keys that you need to trigger in sequence in the game. So typically you don't worry about that. You just have your looping animation, which would have the first frame and the last frame the same, so it's not jarring, and then your play once or play once and cap would just do whatever and don't worry about matching up with the first frame. So once you've got that, you're basically ready to then export the asset. You can go back to object mode. I typically will select the whole asset. I actually like to remove the camera and light and the collection before exporting. That way I can just do an export of everything and it will bring the camera and light into Talespire. The alternative is you can just select your everything in your armature and do an export selected object, or you can still export everything and remove the camera and light once you get it into Unity. So basically you want to do export, you want to do FBX. Make sure that you are exporting as FBX, not as OBJ. OBJ will not maintain any of your animations or your bone structure. FBX does. So you're going to export as FBX, you're going to save it somewhere, and then you can pull that asset into Unity and set up the animations exactly the same as is in my Hero Forge video tutorial that talks about the Mixamo animations. So from this point on, the process is the same within Unity. So that's basically it. That's how you rig your asset and how you do the weight painting to make sure that the mesh will reflect the bone structure. And that's how you animate it afterwards to create animations that you can bring into Unity and then into Talespire. Good luck.